My name is Julia Orduña. I'm the Southeast Texas Regional Director for Texas Housers. And today we'll be talking about disaster recovery funding. Um, these funds are utilized for recovery after a disaster, and the city of Houston was able to get some funds. Today we'll be having a conversation with Councilmember Tiffany Thomas. She is the chair of the Housing Committee, and we're going to be talking a little more about what is happening with these fundings and what is happening in the city of Houston. So let's get into what is CDBG-DR. We in the government use a lot of acronyms. And so when we talk about CDBG-DR, we're talking about Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. These are HUD funds. They're federal funds that are allocated by Congress after a disaster. So they're not money that we see often. It's only after a disaster where there's a presidentially declared disaster that maybe the Congress can give money to states and municipalities. So this federal funding is addressing long-term disaster recovery. It's focused on the unmet needs of a community. So once FEMA funds, SBA, which is Small Business Administration funds, and insurance comes in and supports communities, there's often a gap. And so these CDBG-DR funds are to address that gap in housing, infrastructure, economic revitalization, and mitigation in order to continue recovering and responding to the disaster. These funds are supposed to be used to target communities that are least likely to recover without this funding. And so let's talk a little bit about what happened to Houston. Houston received $314 million to recover from 2024 storms. This includes the derecho that hit us in May and Hurricane Beryl, which came in July. And so the way that CDBG-DR funding works is that the disaster hits. And once the disaster hits, the governor of Texas will ask for a disaster declaration, and then the president will declare a disaster declaration. Once that's done, Congress can allocate the funding. Then the local municipalities need to draft a plan of how this money will be spent. And that is the point in time in which we are now. The government is drafting its action plan, and we are hearing from the city of Houston how they intend to utilize these $314 million. And then we will see these programs implemented within the span of 6 years. The money has to be spent in 6 years. And we often see housing programs, infrastructure programs, public services, and mitigation programs being organized and implemented during this time. What we're currently hearing from the city of Houston is that they will use this money in this fashion. We see here a table with multiple programs, each of their funding sources, and a description of what each of these programs are intending to do. So we see 8 programs on our screen. 2 of them are housing programs, and this is the newest iterance of how this money is being spent. Originally, we had seen that the city of Houston was going to allocate $0 towards housing programs, but now we're seeing that they will spend $20 million on single-family programs, which are meant to rehabilitate or reconstruct single-family homes. They're also allocating $30 million for multifamily housing programs, which are meant to develop either repairing or reconstructing or new construction for the preservation of multifamily housing. We're also seeing them put $151 million into power generation resilience programs. This program is to purchase and install natural gas generators at facilities and possibly paying for those facility modifications. They're also suggesting that ongoing operations and maintenance considerations be spent with this funding. And we're hearing that those facilities will be fire facilities, police stations, multi-service stations, multi-service centers, and libraries. We're also seeing a program for emergency response and public safety for $15 million to purchase vehicles like ambulances and high water vehicles, and also communication systems. They're putting $41 million for homeless service programs, and this would be to operate shelters, case management, or rental assistance programs. And then on the mitigation set aside, which after Hurricane Harvey, there is now a 15% mitigation set aside. So this is to think about preparation and think about resilience. There are $41 million for the mitigation set aside. And the way that the city is intending on spending that money is in two programs: a debris repository acquisition and development program, which intends to purchase 2 landfills, prepare the site, any construction and modification needed for that site, and security measures. And they're also suggesting $8 million for vegetation management for debris removal programs to purchase this management, the debris removal equipment, and actually do the vegetation removal and public services. So these are the things that we're hearing and seeing from the city of Houston and how they're intending on spending the money. Now I would like to welcome City Council member Tiffany Thomas to join the conversation. Tiffany D. Thomas was reelected in 2024 and is a transformative public servant, a visionary leader, and a trusted coalition builder, serving as Houston City Council member for District F, home of one of the most diverse populations in the city and the state. Known for her bold leadership, people-centric approach, and fearless policy execution, Thomas is redefining what local government can do when driven by courage, clarity, and community trust. As the chair of the Housing and Community Affairs under 2 mayoral administrations, Thomas has been at the forefront of housing affordability and investment, championing policy reform and mobilizing millions in disaster recovery dollars for homeowners affected by Winter Storm Uri in 2021, and Houston's rent relief program, which gained national attention during COVID-19 global pandemic in 2020. I'd like to welcome Councilmember Tiffany Thomas to the stream. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm well. Thank you for having me. Good morning to all of our housers and advocates and everyone that's been championing CDBG Disaster Recovery 2024. Happy to be here.
Yes, and so we know that you have a lot of experience with CDBG DR funding, especially because you are the chair of the Housing Committee. So because you've engaged with this funding pot in several instances, can you explain to us in your experience what approving and spending this funding looks like?
No, absolutely. And I think what's so important for those that are listening and watching to remember is that without CDBG dollars, the city of Houston Housing Department could not operate. We are an entitlement city, and so 99% of what is funded and how we operate is from federal dollars. Number 2, we have to move swiftly with disaster recovery funds. Houston is becoming the disaster city. And over the last decade, we've experienced up to 11 federally declared disasters. So we are great when it comes to being Houston strong in the immediate and leaning on our neighbors. And we have to do a better job of long-term recovery, of making sure that the federal dollars we receive are invested. So we can go back to Ike, Rita, tax day floods, Memorial Day weekend floods, Hurricane Harvey in 2017. And one thing that's so important to note about community development block grant disaster dollars, unlike FEMA, HUD does not have a permanent appropriation. What does that mean? After Katrina, we realized that the FEMA agency did not move as quickly as possible to address emergency needs. Now they're able to do so. You can call FEMA, get your $750 check directly to your checking account or a live check. HUD has to lobby Congress after the president approves the declaration to add an earmark for that disaster, which speaks to the delay. The good news is that the Biden-Harris administration moved expeditiously to make sure that Houston received $314 million within the same year before they closed out their term. So now the city of Houston is obligated to do right by those funds. So I'm glad that you walked through all of the program items. And I just want to remind folks that the administration, the city of Houston, proposed $0 of housing. And when you look at the data, and if you participated in any of the community meetings, read any of the articles, $299 million was the assessment from FEMA. And that is the only assessment and the only data that we are driving in. And so do we say yes to power generation? Yes. Do we say yes to debris removal sites? Yes, because we've had seniors and families locked in their neighborhoods because they could not get away from the tree. And frankly, Central Point was nowhere to be found during those times when those trees were on those power lines. So the city has an obligation to be proactive in that area. What I am offering as chair and in partnership with so many stakeholders, individuals alike, is that we have to deeply invest in the housing piece because the long-term recovery takes such a long time. When you look at the number of units that we have lost historically, storm after storm, heat wave after heat wave, freeze, flood, you name it, Houstonians are in need. And we have done transformational things with CDBG funds. Let me state that from the city's perspective, the housing department has been able to cut homelessness in the city down to 2/3, a national model with federal dollars. So the city has been able to remove apartment complexes out of the floodplain, federal dollars, creating more detention and green space. The city's been able to do a lot of these things. So we cannot take our foot off the gas when it's time for investing in housing, because oftentimes new construction, when we talk about affordability, we're thinking new construction, getting a family stable, but we're not inclusive of the preservation of the existing stock. And sometimes that's missed. We have an opportunity with very limited funds. It's $314 million, right? It's not a big payday. So we have to be very thoughtful and surgical with how we invest in these funds. And $0 won't do, $50 million won't do. And we have to continue to invest in preserving the stock that people have worked so hard to purchase and maintain, especially since it's a part of their generational wealth.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talk about all the different types of responsibilities that we have as a city to be able to maintain our protection and our resilience. It's not just about the housing, it's also about some of that infrastructure. But if we don't maintain the homes, then where are our people going to go? And if the city is already talking about this very drastic need of ending street homelessness, the last thing we want to do is to continue to add to the homeless population because people don't have a place to live.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the reality is that homelessness is a housing issue, right? So we can applaud the $40 million of investment to the unhoused community because we deeply need it. But when it says rental assistance, right, we have to, that's shelter. Right. So that means that that's an integral piece into the work that we do. Other cities have visited the city of Houston to look and see how we have done it. And we've done it with investing in housing and investing in the social services, the social safety net of our community, that continuum of care. What this proposal does, it gets us like just short of a goalpost of making sure that we can match our money with our mission and making sure that Houstonians can stay housed, the unhoused can, and then we're investing in the long-term recovery of our city.
Yeah. What is your biggest concern about what we're hearing about the DR24 funds?
My biggest concern is that it is short-sighted in terms of the power generation. And let me just really underscore this. Yes, we were able to open up, I think, 9 city facilities, multi-service centers, during the last freeze. I think that was MLK weekend, January. But we have to keep in context, and the administration did share with council a listing of all of the locations, over 100 locations in the city. But we have to be clear, we've also reduced our workforce by almost 1,500. So if we're going to have put 100 generators throughout the city, who's operating those locations? Where's the manpower? We've cut library, we've cut parks, we've cut solid waste. People are gone, and these are already lean departments. So I think what is fair is, yes, we need to make sure that in the immediate, before FEMA can respond, that the city is standing up sites for you to charge your medical device, safely shelter with your family, charge your phone, even if it's for a couple of hours, or if you need to be overnight. We have to prepare for that. However, I think 100 locations at the disregard of investing in the people of the city is a problem. And I also want to highlight, in 2021, we had the winter freeze. The entire nation watched the state of Texas freeze for almost 8 days, no power. We received a $30 million direct allocation from the Biden-Harris administration. Marsha Fudge was the 18th HUD secretary, actually visited Houston with the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee to survey the damage. She awarded at that time, because I was there, $30 million directly to Houston. And I want to remind those who are watching, that was the costliest insurance claim for the state of Texas in history. So when you think about damage, the Houston delegation later went back to Congress to lobby to where Houston was able to get an additional $20 million. We have a $50 million direct allocation to the city. That money is on the street now. $50 million, $40 million into repair, $10 million into public facilities for the most part. So with that freeze money, we put allocated 2 generators in District B on the north side, 1 in District J. There's an alternative location in District D. In the fiscal year 25 capital improvement project, where most of these projects should, these kind of insertions of generators should come, we added A-Leaf Neighborhood Center, added a generator, Kingwood added a generator, and I think there was an amendment for another generator as an option, right? So we have, by practice and pattern, added generators throughout our public facilities, right? So we've been addressing that. This is not a new demand. When you look at the list of generators, you have locations like HPD's mounted patrol. That's where the horses are going. That's where they're at, right? And so although I'm an animal lover, I also just have a heart for people. And I just believe that if we're able to take that $2 million that could go to the mounted patrol unit, where we're not going to send Houstonians to shelter in place, we're not going to send them there, then we can invest that into neighborhoods like Independence Heights. And I remember there was a young woman who came to public session, and she said 2 of her neighbors were displaced after Beryl because there was a tree on the roof and they had to go live with their daughter out in the suburbs or somewhere in Cyprus. Right. And because, and she was speaking to the fact that we were talking about multifamily development coming into Independence Heights, and why it had to happen because so many people are being displaced by disaster. So we have to be really forceful with that. And I've never forgotten that story, because that story is happening all over the city, right? So when we look at $50 million, that's going to go just like that, because the demand is just that high. I have 6 roof leaks in my home from Beryl. Literally was on the phone with media and water was falling on my head. And so this is happening to those who are vocal about it, saying, I need the help. This is happening to those who are like, I just want to get it done and figure it out on my own. This is happening to people who they don't even realize that the city has an obligation to address their need. And so when we have federal dollars and federal partners like our Houston congressional delegation that's moving on our behalf this quickly, we are obligated to get this money back to the street.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with everything that you're saying. And I know that the late Sheila Jackson Lee did push to get that money, that it was so necessary here after Winter Storm Uri. Going a little off tangent to what you were talking about, we did get 20 mobile generators after Uri that were not deployed in the city of Houston. And then since then, 15 of them have been moved to the city of San Antonio to patch their failing power system. How do you feel about, companies, private companies getting these tax dollar funds and then not really deploying them in the ways that are necessary? And now we're footing the bill with our disaster money.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we see within this proposal, is that That's the real accountability. And what's true, what I know to be true, because I get the bill every month. Our power bill is still going up. Your rates are still going up, right? And we're not able to get that exchange or that demand, that real accountability to know that these are the things that we celebrate. Wow, we got 20 mobile generators, and then you don't see them in your neighborhood. My concern with the proposed package is that we're saying we're going to have these debris sites. We're saying that we're going to cut trees off of power lines, and we're going to have Houstonians say, but I thought the city said that they were going to do this. Why am I now, my insurance is saying that I have to pay for this? Why is Centerpoint saying that it's not their responsibility, it's the city? Why is the city saying it's Centerpoint or it's your private home? And I think because we are not really rolling out a true plan, I think what we see is a concept of a plan. Versus real details of these are the priority neighborhoods. These are the zip codes where we're going to prioritize first, that deep need. And I think that's the problem. And just as an elected official, this work moves really quickly. You know, every week it's a new issue, it's a new item, and it's difficult to have space and time to share what's really happening. That's why I'm so grateful for this limited time we have on this Sunday morning with my orange juice to talk about the things that matter to us as Houstonians. But I think you're absolutely right. There's an email in my inbox today of photos of a resident who said that Centerpoint said it was the city's responsibility. Houston said it was Centerpoint's responsibility, and the 8 to 10 neighbors on the street had to come out of their pocket, get the roofs off the leaf, clear the damage from the electrical wires, and start their life over again. And my concern is that we'll continue to see that.
Yes, and I think that the community's concern is not whose responsibility it is, but ultimately getting the job done. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers and information that we've seen after Hurricane Beryl. Let me pull up this. So walk us through what we're seeing here.
Sure. If I can put on my faculty hat, I'm a newly tenured faculty member at Prairie View A&M University, the only HBCU and institution in Texas with the community development graduate program. So really proud of that. And really my work in the classroom informs my work in the horseshoe. So the map that you'll see the city of Houston, you'll see the colors, and you'll see it by district. And you've been hearing a lot about the 299 unmet need. And I don't know if you can zoom this image, Julia, just at the bottom so we can see the numbers. And so I just want to highlight to you by district. When we talk about $50 million and people say, oh, that's such a good thing, and people cheered. Yeah. But let's look at District B, where 73,000 Houstonians called FEMA in 2024 for disaster assistance for housing. That's what that number is. And they yielded $76 million in the housing assistance during those storms. So that tells me $50 million has to be deeply invested just in District B alone. Or when we look at District D, 56,000 Houstonians called and received $51 million of emergency assistance related to housing. This also includes food, right? Like if they had to have a supplement for food. Let's look at District H. $47 million. So if it's me and I see $50 million, in my mind, I'm like, I need that just for my district alone. That's how deeply we have to invest in these neighborhoods. And I also want to highlight districts F and J, because I think sometimes people can misinterpret numbers and say the need is not as great. But when you look at districts F and J, where we have some of the most diverse, ethnically diverse, over 140 languages spoken in our schools, densely connected neighborhoods, what I call the cultural currency of the city. When you look at language barrier, when you look at cultural barrier, right? That shows you why the numbers are so low, because they don't have access to it, right? We don't have that language partnership to let our Vietnamese brothers and sisters. I have a huge Central American population in District F. Listen, our El Salvadorian brothers and sisters, who's going to community with them? After the storm, I remember getting a pedicure and going to my nail salon, and I had to let my nail tech know. I asked her, "Are you doing okay from the storm?" And she was like, "No." And we live in the same zip code. I got all those girls together. We got on their phones in Vietnamese for FEMA and got them enrolled to get their emergency assistance. So now when I walk in, it's Tiffany, right? Because you got to meet people where they're at, and that work is not being done consistently. So I don't want people to look at these numbers and say the need is not high. You can come to the West Side, Gulfton, Sharpstown, A-Leaf, you name it. That need is there, but we also have nuance of language and diversity. So when you look at just by district, this is just everyone who qualified for the FEMA emergency assistance. You had people who were denied. You had people who didn't even call, who weathered the storm and weathered damage on their own and out of their own pocket. So this is just a snapshot to the real need. The 299 is that physical structured need. This is what's happening in the lives of Houstonians after every storm. And then I just want to highlight the next slide of the congressional maps, so you can understand from a congressional perspective, your congressional district, the need, because these are federal dollars. These are not our local property tax dollars. These are federal dollars. And you need to know that, especially since the Texas Congressional 18th does not have a member, and we are in the midst of a battle with the legislature and the governor on 29, 9, and 18. So if you can just highlight the bottom of that as well. And why we need to, as an aside, make sure that we are on public record about redistricting and what this is, because we need our advocates to advocate for us, because they've been doing this for us consistently to make sure that we receive federal dollars back to our congressional district. So let's look at Texas Congressional 9, Al Green, $133 million of federal assistance and housing emergency assistance during 2024. That's insane. So when you just look at it from that perspective, they can command a third of our 314, just like that. Right? When you look at the Texas Congressional 18 that has not had a member for a while, $130 million, 45,000 residents. And when you look at the voting pattern, it's essentially 145,000 people who vote in the Texas Congressional 18th during every November. So that's the deep investment that we have to keep in mind, is the lives of the people. When we walk into Bagby, in the horseshoe, it says that the people are the city. This is showing you what's happening to the city. This is what's showing you what's happening to the city. Texas Congressional District 29, $135 million. And I would offer to you as well, being a Hispanic opportunity district, there's still some language barriers here where some communities didn't even apply, didn't even want to do that out of fear of whatever's happening with this federal administration. You see what I'm saying? And all of the things. So just in context of the numbers, the administration has proposed, has packaged a story of, well, look what we've done with housing over here. We're doing housing over there. We're doing it over here. So we don't have to do it with this one. And what I shared when they presented is that we would never offer that same sentiment to HPD. We would never tell the Houston Fire Department, we just gave you one of the largest 5-year deals in the department's history. We don't have to do it again. As long as my name is Tiffany DeShell Thomas, the Houston Fire Department and their union will be back on year 5, getting ready for the new contract. Do you hear what I'm saying? And they're going to say, we want more. And that's what you're supposed to do. And Houstonians are supposed to do that. And we have to say that we want more, because the numbers don't lie.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you were talking about the other pots of housing funding. We've heard the city staff talk about DR 17, and there's money from 17, there's money from DR 21 from the storm. And then there's also been conversations about the CUNY Homes Choice Neighborhood Initiative within the context of disaster recovery. How do you feel when they're bringing up all these other pots of housing funds?
Well, I think those are distraction tactics. And let's be clear, some people don't know the difference between the Housing Authority, the federal agency that manages public housing inventory, and the City of Houston's Housing Department. And I think that was evident based on some of the conversations we heard last Wednesday in the Horseshoe. So let's just be really, really clear in what's fact. The Housing Authority has nothing to do with the City of Houston's Community Development Block Grant dollars, entitlement, or our disaster recovery. Nothing to do with. The City of Houston does not fund the Houston Housing Authority. The last funding, I believe, that the City of Houston, the Housing Authority received from the City of Houston, we were a pass-through during the global pandemic. It was like $8 million for a rental subsidy to keep those on the 30% AMI housed. It was like $8 million of home funds, and we issued it to the Housing Authority. That is it. Do not allow distraction conversation to get us off what's important, is that we need deeper investment in housing. Yes, DR-17 funds were recalculated in terms of restructured. So the GLO clawed back dollars from each service line, each program line, and they reissued funds back to the City of Houston. That is the new down payment assistance program that you see, up to $125,000 for Harvey. You still have to, that's still Harvey related, right? So you cannot supplant funds in those ways, right? You cannot double dip. That's Harvey. DR-21, that's the freeze. People are documented with the freeze. Maybe they didn't have the same impact for derecho, but the freeze tore their house up. That money's for them. And the reality is we are a disaster city. We have to expect that these funds will continue to come until we invest in whatever mechanisms from a resiliency perspective, literal, public infrastructure, like all of these things, green spaces to help mitigate that. The reality is that we have $314 million that are federal tax dollars from the residents of the City of Houston. And we have an obligation to get this back to them, either in their hand as a reimbursement or in their life as instability or in their community in terms of those generators. And so 75% of this package I'm fine with, minus purchasing police vehicles. I think those items should come through a capital improvement program. And I think those should come through when we're negotiating their contract. You can't just do money. You got to do their money, and you have to do their infrastructure. And frankly, let me say, I have the largest HPD command center in the city, West Side. It's the training one. That's where they do everything. That building needs to be torn down, and they need a whole 2.0 type of facility. Many of our public facilities need capital improvement plans because they can't operate fully in the same place. I am not sure that residents will be going there to charge up and to, sleep and rest and have their families. It's not set up for that. And so I think that we have to take these dollars and be really smart about not putting the lipstick on the pig that was mentioned last week on Wednesday when they were talking about two of our main city buildings. What this proposal does is offering the same thing. We're going to give you a new generator in a building it's dilapidated. Some of our fire stations, they need a deep investment. And so I would prefer for those dollars to go back to the people in a very fair manner. We do generators, we do public safety in terms of the electrical lights in the trees, but we also do housing so people can stay in their neighborhood by choice.
Yeah, and so the CDBG-DR regulations state that these funds can't be supplanted or replacing general operating expenses. Right now, as you're talking about these facility improvements and just the need to, give a lot of our public facilities a facelift, do you see that happening with this action plan? Is there some concern there?
Yeah, I do. And matter of fact, you have to request a waiver. So the City of Houston is requesting waivers for majority of this program because they have to ask to use funds this is normally not a subscribed use. And normally you don't use a disaster recovery funds, long-term funds for your own capital improvement that the city, in any other normal circumstance, we would have absorbed the debt to improve our fire stations. We would have absorbed the debt to enhance our police stations and our libraries and all of those things. We have a deferred maintenance budget that we talk about all the time about our city buildings. This is for the long-term recovery for Houstonians, not our city operations, right? This is in any other circumstance, if the disaster didn't happen, since the disaster happened, the damage that disaster caused, how can we take those funds and go back and replace and make it better? Not our everyday obligation as the city of Houston to maintain public facilities, and everyone has a different perspective about that. And I do, and yes, our first responders need generators. And I think for most of that, yes, we can do that. But to put more into that than the people is alarming, and something that I think we should continue to push back on and keep the people centered at that work.
Yeah, definitely. So we're actually having this discussion because this item was brought up to the agenda at City Council this past week. It was about the new budget and how they've included now the $50 million into housing. And the item was tagged, so it's going to be on next week's agenda, public comment on Tuesday, and then the vote will be happening on Wednesday. And you shared in a post recently with a statement stating that recovery without meaningful housing is just rhetoric. Yes. Can you expand on that? And can you talk about what you're hoping to see next week?
Sure. So I authored an amendment of adding an additional $50 million to make our housing program whole for disaster recovery 24, removing 50 million from the 151 million for power generation, which puts almost a third into housing, a third into power generation. It keeps that line item at $101 million. All other programs will remain the same. Homelessness, debris removal, you name it, all that stays intact. But it gives our city and our residents a fair chance at recovery. And so since the item was tagged, there were multiple council members that were in the queue. We were unable, it was tagged without discussion. So we were unable to talk about our points. We were unable to do that. So I decided, listen, a tag won't stop me. Let's get this to the people. Let me communicate what's so important about not just the amendment, but the data on the maps that we showed, just in context to show you that $50 million just won't do. One neighborhood could command $50 million. So the false argument that we are doing housing, we don't have to do it, when every U.S. city, every U.S. mayor is talking about housing and affordability all across the United States. But we are talking about something else, doing the opposite of that. So the amendment states that the amendment and that item will come up on Wednesday. Want to encourage everyone who's listening, watching, who cares, who has experienced any type of impact from any disaster in 24. Let your voice be heard. What that allows the housing department to do is move very quickly. With onboarding this program. I will remind everyone that we're still like at step 2A. This project has to go back to HUD for approval with all of the waivers, right? And so if I was really in my way, I would challenge the administration on all these waivers of usurping these dollars for whatever their priorities are. I'm not. And I'm focusing on making sure that we can preserve the housing inventory in this city and keep people in their homes, because there will be a time that it will be said that Houston's no longer affordable. That will be the story of like, when did Houston become unaffordable? And they're going to point to the last time we had federal disaster dollars at $314 million, and we invested little in it. They're going to point to some of the decisions that we've made. And the reality with this federal administration, we don't know what's going to happen with the FEMA agency. With HUD being stripped 44% of its budget, we don't know what's going to happen, right? But we're seeing it. We're going to feel it. We're already seeing relics of that with the Housing Authority removing thousands of people off its wait list. because they said they simply didn't respond to an email. And those who are housing insecure may not have access to, it's the digital divide. And they may have to go stay with their auntie, and they may have to go to their sister's house with their kids because they're not stable. That's why they're demanding a waiver, a voucher. That's why they're on the list. So when we see this stuff happening at a local level, know that it's signaled at the federal level. So this may be our last chance to deeply invest in housing inventory to keep us stable and preserve us with better materials, more resilient materials, so our neighborhoods can stay whole. So I hope everyone signs up for public session. The deadline is Monday at 3 p.m. Make your voice heard, and then also call your council member. If you've never reached out to your council member, search who is my council member so you can confirm who that person is, and ask them for their vote to make sure that housing is increased. And like I said in my post, if any candidate has ever come to you and asked you for some money, they didn't ask you for their vote, they didn't ask you for something, ask them for their vote on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Ask them for their vote to make sure that your grandmother or yourself can have the roof repair, or the reimbursement, or the repair to the multifamily, or the opportunity to have a new development come into the neighborhood. Ask them for that.
Yeah, definitely. And we will drop information about how to sign up for public comment and be civically involved. Like council members said, these happen every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and you have to sign up by Monday at 3 p.m. And so we know that there's a shortened timeline right now. The city of Houston has asked for 3 extensions at this point from HUD, and they have been granted. And so the city right now, as the timeline stands, must submit its action plan by August 19th. What can be done in the next 23 days?
I don't like to think that I'm jaded to where I think everything is baked. I don't. But I don't think this is fully baked. And I do think a piece of me thinks that the administration would be willing to increase housing. I think they realize like it's the right thing to do. And I am only speaking from my perspective because, I only make decisions with the information that I have at the time. That's how I vote. That's how I understand. And so I don't know all the other dynamics. I don't know the other stakeholder groups that are lobbying for debris removal. I don't know how that is. But what I can say, what can be done is from a collective and an individual perspective, is that when I say make your voices heard, literally reach out to it really does make the difference. Don't think that your voice won't matter. Like the anecdotal stories that I'm able to recall is because people showed up to public session, or they sent an email and I read it and I'm like, or I met them in passing at a community event. So I think from between now and then, there is space to really communicate and let people know, and let the administration and council know that this is a priority while we address other things. I don't think it's a either or. I think this is about and both. And do we have gaps in our local recovery system? Sure. We didn't even have a warming center or cooling center on the west side. And the A-Leaf YMCA would open up, and they closed down May 30th. I have nothing. So yes, we have to do those things. But we have to be measured in making sure that at the end of the day, it's the people who are the city, and we have to give them a fighting chance to stay. We keep talking about population growth and where people are leaving and where they're going. And I'm telling you, people are making clear decisions about if they stay in the city of Houston after every storm. Like, people are like, I can't keep doing this. It's just the emotional tax of, your fight or flight, the recovery, the impact of it, and then all the things you have to come out of your pocket to do that you did not plan for, which sets us back financially. And when these federal dollars come, it's our safety net. So I am optimistic that we have some space between now and August before we send this to HUD. For submission, to really put our foot on the gas and say, no, housing is now.
Yeah, thank you. And zooming out a little bit, we're talking about the city of Houston where we live and play, but we don't work in a silo. And
Right.
so right now, the Texas legislature is in special session talking about disaster resilience, response, recovery, because of the devastation that we saw in the Hill Country. And our hearts go out to all of the people in Flash Flood Alley.
Yeah.
But these are not new things. We have seen Flash Flood Alley happen every decade. We know as a coastal community that we're living in high disaster prone areas. And so right now in the action plan, we're seeing a lot of resilience baked in. And like we're saying that possible supplanting of government general operations because we need this hardening. If the state is able to take some of this on, how does that give us space to actually recover? Or what is the state's responsibility to work with the localities as well and to support the resilience of communities all over Texas?
Really good question. Politics is real funny. And I recall when the late Mayor Turner, we received Harvey money, I want to say right when I was elected in 2020. And frankly, it was one of the reasons I was really resistant to serve as chair of the housing committee, because I knew we had just received Harvey money. We had just done the action program plan like in 19. I'm sworn in 2020, because I knew this type of elephant. And I had a front row seat to the politics that were played against Houston from Austin and what they attempted to do to stymie and delay that Harvey recovery program to now. And the good news is that these dollars are direct to the city of Houston. Let me say that. They've just made all these types of accommodations, which really should have been made because we're talking on the backs of people. So y'all are playing politics on the backs of these neighborhoods and people being stabilized. And so politics is very funny and it's interesting. And so this administration has a different type of relationship, and I hope that it's leveraged for the benefit of the city, where we don't have to encumber cost and things where the state of Texas could do this, because it should be their position to make sure that its number one money-making city, the city of Houston, is stable because of what we contribute to the economic footprint of this state. Hopefully we shouldn't have to encumber that. And that's my position. Hopefully someone is turning water into wine on our behalf. And I think we have resiliency in language in that plan. I'm not sure, again, how that really translates to the impact of everyday community, 7747 or 77072, where I live, where the average income is $46,000. Right? How does this show up? How do we know we're resilient? We're resilient when, that's my faculty hat. We start things with research question. What's the question? We're resilient when what? Like, that's what we have to solve for, and we can't solve for it. And we're not resilient when we're just cutting trees off of electrical lines. Like, there's something else that's missing. But I do hope that this special session yields something, not just for our neighbors in Kerr County, but also for all Texans, because we all froze together. Some of us are, froze together, flooding, storms are coming. And so I think I'm watching just like everyone else to see what we yield after this session.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this conversation or share with the community?
I think, one, again, thanks for, carving out some time on your Sunday, just fully participating in your own civic engagement, which I think is really important. And for me, with moments like this, I'm always reminded that if I was not an elected official, what would I want my member doing for me? If I wasn't paying attention and I just happened to Google my council member, would I be proud of what they were saying? Would I be proud? Like, yeah. And so I stand on that type of principle representing 4 Houstonians, that when it's all said and done, even if we don't win, we're going to go down bruised and bloodied, and people are going to know that we stood for something. Because when the high school student looks me up in 20 years, I don't want them to say that I was a vote that did not support enhancing housing in the city of Houston. So I want to thank you for what y'all are doing every day in the city and in the state. And thank you for bringing other people along.
Yes, no, thank you for paying attention, for asking the hard questions and getting down to the root of the answers, because we need that transparency and people want to be involved. And when the conversation is happening around the horseshoe, people are listening. So thank you for asking those questions and being a public servant for as long as you have been. And thank you for joining us. Have a good Saturday, good Sunday.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone who was able to join us today during our live conversation. We're hopeful to see what is coming out of the city of Houston. Like our council member mentioned, there will be a vote this Wednesday. And so if you would like to participate, either listening or speaking out, you can sign up on before Monday at 3 p.m. to speak on Tuesday at 2 p.m. You can also keep in touch with Texas Housers and know what is happening in our neck of the woods across the state. Sign up for our newsletter, and we're more than happy to keep you involved in anything else that we're doing. Thank you for joining us today, and happy Sunday.